Hi everybody, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about real numbers multiplying and dividing. Our previous video was real numbers adding and subtracting. So in very much a similar way, today we're going to be discussing when we are multiplying or dividing integers. Okay, and we're actually not going to do simplifying expressions with integers just because we will need to discuss orders of operations, and we will not be getting to that just quite today. We will be doing some simplifying expressions with integers a little bit later on. So for now, let's go ahead and just get started talking about the sign rule for multiplication, and then we'll go ahead and talk about the sign rule for division right after that, okay, after some examples. So let me just make sure that I have my colors that I'm looking for. Here we go. Okay, so the box right here, this big box, is really going to be our guide for multiplying integers, okay? Particularly taking a look at this box right here. If we were to multiply two positive numbers together, we would end up with a positive answer. And if I were to multiply two negative numbers, we actually also end up with a positive answer. So the rule kind of is here, if I multiply two numbers that have the same sign, you are going to also get the same sign, okay? However, if you multiply a positive number with a negative number, you're going to get a negative sign. And similarly, if you multiply a negative number with a positive number, you're also going to get a negative sign. Okay, so basically, same sign, positive answer. If they're different signs, you're going to get a negative answer. So let's go ahead and do a couple of examples. So positive 4 times a negative 4, one's positive, one's negative. I know my answer is going to be negative, and 4 times 2 is 8. So that would be my answer for that. Example 2. I have a negative 7 times a negative 5, so I know my answer is going to be positive. And then you just multiply the numbers. 7 times 5 is 35. Finally, I have negative 8 times a positive 3. So I have a negative number times a positive number, so I know my answer has to be negative, and 8 times 3 is 24. So that would be my answer, okay? And I notice I crossed off our simplification because we need to talk about order of operations. The next kind of big thing that goes with multiplication is evaluating exponents. And when we're talking about exponents, the number that is in the parentheses for both of my examples are what you call the base. Okay, and the little number kind of as a superscript, which is the number on top, kind of in smaller handwriting, is called the exponent. That number tells you how many times you're multiplying the base. So the base for my first example right here is a negative 3. So I am multiplying negative 3 times. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of do a mini step before getting the answer, and it's just essentially I'm going to multiply these two first ones together, which would give me 9, and then I multiply it by the remaining negative 3. Okay, so then I have a positive 9 because negative 3 times negative 3 gives me a positive 9, and I have positive 9 times a negative number, so I know my answer has to be negative, and 9 times 3 is 27. So if I have an odd exponent, okay, and my base is negative, then you're going to end up with a negative answer. Now, the next example, notice I have negative 2, and I'm multiplying it 4 times because my exponent is 4, which is, by the way, even. So just like I did before, I'm actually going to multiply these two together. So negative times a negative is a positive. 2 times 2 is 4. And then same thing here, I can actually multiply these next two together and I'm going to get the same answer, which is 4. And if I multiply 4 and 4, I get 16. And it's going to end up being positive. So if I multiply, or if I have an even exponent of a negative base, you're going to end up with a positive answer. So those are kind of like the big rules that we're talking about here. And that's really all we have for multiplication. When it comes to division, really we're looking at some very, very similar things. All right. The rules, the sign rules for division are similar to the sign rules, but for multiplication. If I have two of the same signs, so negative and negative, positive and positive, that are being divided by each other, you're going to end up with a positive. However, if they are different signs, so positive divided by a negative or a negative divided by a positive, you're going to end up with a negative answer. So very, very similar to the multiplication one. However, when we're talking about division in particular, there are a few kind of things that we need to bring to our attention and kind of remind ourselves. We can actually rewrite division as a fraction. And the way we would do that is if I have A divided by B, where B is a non-zero number, then we can write it as A over B. Okay? So knowing this, what we would have to do here is, for the second part, is if A is a non-zero number, okay, so A is a number itself, then we have to determine where we would place the 0. If I have a fraction equal to 0, then that means to say the 0 has to be in the numerator and the A would be in the denominator, okay? However, if my fraction, if my division is undefined, that means to say 0 is in the denominator and the A value, the non-zero number, is in the numerator. So that's another big takeaway thing that we need to know. Okay, and finally, if A and B are real numbers and B is not 0, meaning to say it is not undefined, if I have a negative division, so if my negative there on the outside of the fraction, that means to say that either the numerator could be negative or the denominator could be negative, or you could keep that negative out on the side. All right, so those are kind of the things that we need to know when we're talking about division. Okay, so let's do a couple of examples here. So I have a negative 20 divided by 4, because that's what it would turn out to be, negative 20 divided by 4. So however you want to write it. So I have a negative divided by a positive, so my answer is going to end up being negative. And 20 divided by 4 is 5. So that would be my answer. Finally, or next one, I have 36 divided by negative 3. So I could rewrite this as a division problem if you would like. Personally, I prefer leaving it in that fraction form, but it is your choice. It is the same thing. So I have a positive number divided by a negative number, so my answer is negative. And 36 divided by 3 is 12. So I have negative 5 for my first answer, 12 for my second answer. And then the last one, I have two negative numbers divided by each other, which means to say I have a negative divided by a negative. So my answer is going to be positive. And so I have 36 divided by 12. That is going to be a positive 3. Okay. So the last thing that we need to talk about, if two numbers whose products are 1 are called inverses, or multiplicative inverses or reciprocals. So reciprocals or multiplicative inverses. Because if you were to multiply them together, they would be inverses of each other. So here it says find the reciprocal of -5. So the sign in this particular case does not change. All you're really doing is you're flipping it over. So this could be 5/1. We could write it as a fraction. The reciprocal would end up being this fraction flipped over. So it would be 1/-5. That would be the reciprocal. Okay. If we take a look at the second example, I already have a fraction. All you would do is you would flip over the fraction to get the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 27/15 would be 15/27, and that's your reciprocal. Note, the only number that does not have a reciprocal is 0, because 0/1 is 0, and some number over 0 is undefined, which means they are not reciprocals of each other, because if I were to multiply them together, you would not get 1. Okay? So that's really all that there is to this particular lesson. Tune in next time.